words on Gaza, but for action. And I think Catherine's clarity on these issues really shone through. What also came across was Jim Gavin's enthusiasm for dismantling what is left of our neutrality, setting himself up really as the pro-war, anti-neutrality candidate, suggesting that the German government, for example, has no choice but to spend money on arms rather than spending money on people's welfare, and enthusiastically embracing the idea of getting rid of the triple lock. I thought that Heather Humphreys very much played the role of a government minister in the debate, a government minister on the defensive, defending government policies. That's the truth. That's her record. But in particular, on one issue, she kind of gave the game away, which is the issue of the Occupied Territories Bill, where she let out the real government position, which is that this will make no difference anyway, and that's why they're dragging their feet on it. It's why they're trying to water it down. So we really think that it's game on now in this presidential election. People are going to turn on, particularly in the context of the debates taking place, and are appealing to people to sign up on the website, to volunteer, to join the thousands of people across the country who are engaged in this campaign. Second point is on the issue of Palestine. What's emerging about this so-called peace proposal is it is a sick joke. The idea that a peace is going to be reached with having effectively Donald Trump and Tony Blair as dictators of Gaza, that is going to be acceptable to the Palestinian people. Netanyahu was immediately out saying that, don't worry, the IDF soldiers are going to be staying. Clearly this is not going to be any basis for a real peace agreement, and therefore we need to keep the pressure up against our own government's complicity and other countries' active support for this genocide. And there's a national protest this Saturday, 12:30 at the Garden of Remembrance. I think it'll be absolutely huge. We had a public meeting in Dublin South West last night, over 100 people at this meeting, the biggest meeting we've organised in a very, very long time, speaking to how people are extremely energised and activated on the issue of Gaza. And obviously at the forefront of that at the moment, the very kind of vanguard of the global movement, is the flotilla, which is a matter of days away from reaching Gaza or being illegally intercepted, being attacked by Israel, being kidnapped. We welcome the fact that there's going to be a joint motion debated today, which opposes the violent acts of Israel against the flotilla. But again, more than words are needed. In my engagement in Leaders' Questions last week with Pascal Donoghue, he made the point about how powerful words are and so on. But everyone who's been watching knows that all the words in the world haven't stopped Israel pursuing this horrendous genocide for almost 2 years now. And the action that I was looking for last week, I'll be looking for again, it's very, very minimal compared to the sending of naval ships and so on, is simply to send a legal observer on the legal observer boat, and not to attempt to enter Gaza, but to simply be there as a witness of what will transpire. The third point, and it's really a question for the government that I really think we need clarity on. It was very welcome to see, and I was positively surprised to hear that in Gillian Sherritt's and Stephen Morrison and Gillian Sherritt's meeting yesterday with Simon Harris and the Minister for Health, that they seem to have agreement for a public inquiry into the disaster that has been the treatment of children with scoliosis and spina bifida. It is concerning. I listened to the interview this morning on Morning Ireland, and unless there has been in the last couple of hours, it's concerning that there's no confirmation from the government that they have agreed to a public inquiry, and it suggests that maybe there's some dispute within government or a lack of clarity within government on them agreeing to that. So we'll be pressing that today to say, look, we need clear statements. Certainly that was the impression they had coming out of that meeting. They were confident enough in that impression to go and speak to the media and say, we have this agreement. Obviously there's going to be a process to work out the details, but it is a bit concerning that the government hasn't made any public statements confirming that so far.
Yeah, I just want to raise a couple of issues as well. Obviously Palestine, it's extremely concerning that there's talk of a peace deal with Donald Trump and Tony Blair sitting on a board with Netanyahu and we don't know who else. No involvement of the Palestinian people or consultation. And let's remember who Tony Blair is. He's a war criminal. He took part in an illegal invasion of Iraq. I remember going on the marches of over 100,000, if not more, in Dublin City. I remember school students walking out of their schools, because I was a teacher at the time and it happened in my school. And the idea that Tony Blair will be in charge of a peace deal for the so-called Middle East is like putting Satan in charge, to be frank. I think I'm really heartened to see some events that have taken place in the last week in relation to Palestine. There was a general strike in Italy by Italian workers blockading goods being shipped to Israel. And I think it's interesting considering you have a far-right leader in charge of Italy, but this, the power of working class people was brought back into play, forcing the government to allow Israeli Navy ships to support the flotilla. Something that I called for actually a few months back in relation to the Irish Navy. Could they not go and support the flotilla? And I think the fact that Turkey, Spain and other countries, pressure is definitely coming on. The war leaders who've been participants, complicit or partnering this genocide for almost 2 years. And I think the national demonstration this Saturday is absolutely crucial. I want to mention one other issue, which is gender-based violence. We've seen in the last 48 hours in this country, there's been 4 victims of male violence. We've had a filicide, suicide, and we've had a familicide, it would seem. And I think that it's extremely concerning, and it shows, we obviously don't know yet the details of that, but that is the facts, that nobody else has been sought by Gardaí. And how little attention this issue is getting is exemplified by what's happening at the Justice Committee later today, where, for example, the issue of counselling records in trials, which was made a huge issue, by survivors, by therapists, by my bill, essentially, is going to be debated along with 14 other things at the Justice Committee in a miscellaneous bill, with one survivor getting 3 minutes. We need a full session on this bill. We need survivors to be allowed to come in bigger numbers than one. We need therapists who are absolutely disgusted they're participating in this practice to be able to come in. And we need to hear, this has been a major issue in society. It's a misogynistic practice. It needs to go. And I think the minister is deliberately pushing it in with a load of other things in order to just get his proposal through, which won't deal with the issue. It won't deal with the fact that your notes can still be accessed in a trial. And that's what creates the trauma. That's what creates the stress, knowing that can happen. We already know teenagers have dropped out of CAMS because of the public discourse on this. So there are 2 very important things. And lastly, not unrelated to macho violence, the NFL came to town this weekend. I raised it in the Dáil on Thursday. I don't think it was raised anywhere else. The fact that the state gave 10 million to this organisation to stage a match when it's worth trillions, the owners are. It's it is the richest league in the world, I believe, and it's also the most jingoistic in America. We heard a lot about somebody being attacked in Temple Bar, which obviously I hope he's okay. I'm sure there was more than one robbery in Temple Bar as a result of tens of thousands of fans coming to Dublin, by the way. It was a bit bizarre. I'm sure there was lots of other crimes committed by the presence of, lots of people potentially drinking late at night. So I do think it's gotten a huge response on social media, the fact that the government did actually pay public money for this group, and I think it should be brought up again in the Dáil this week.
The inquiry, do you have any opinion on what form it should take? Because will we need to have compellability to have, medics and executives at CHI come before the inquiry?
Yeah, 2 things I'd say. The first thing is that, the bottom line point is that this needs to be driven by and fully co-designed with the advocacy groups and the parents. And so they're, they should be presented with all the information. I understand that's what the government is kind of saying, that the different options will be laid out, but ultimately their view on this is going to be crucial. For what it's worth, in my view, yes, I think we're going to need a full public inquiry, including the power of compellability, to actually get to the bottom of it, because I caught the second half of Gillian on Morning Ireland this morning, which was really excellent. Incredible for someone who has suffered this loss and been driven into this because of this, and yet to be so kind of together. And the way she put it was very good, is that you've had a number of different examinations of different aspects, but it's like looking at individual pieces of the jigsaw as opposed to the jigsaw together as a whole. And I thought that was accurate, and that's what we need to have.
Just on the use of counselling records as evidence in criminal trials, what sort of impact is that having on therapists having to participate in disclosure of these records?
Yeah, at 1 o'clock actually we're going to have a standout outside because there are therapists coming to support the one survivor who is given evidence at the committee today. It's had a huge impact. There's actually been a movement, if you like, of therapists around this issue. We've had the Psychology Society of Ireland, we've had all of the professional bodies for therapists and psychotherapists have now come out and said that this should be completely banned. Not maintained as an option, completely banned. It disrupts the confidentiality, it disrupts the relationship that they have, the fact that the client feels that what they say is taken down by the therapist and potentially passed over. And by the way, these are third-party notes. It's actually ludicrous that they're considered as relevant evidence. You know, hearsay is not normally evidence, so they're not written by the person themselves, and obviously the evidence in therapy, you can change your perspective over many times in therapy, so it's been very damaging and they don't want to participate in it, and the Minister needs to listen, not just rush something through that suits him. He's literally taking something out. He's not doing any major change, and this has been identified by so many survivors and therapists as very damaging to their relationship.